Thank you so much for joining us here on Offsite by Learnit. Super excited to have everybody here. We're just going to give folks just a minute to come on in and get settled in the room here. But if you want to go ahead and open up that chat bar and right where you are coming from in the world, in the nation, would love to hear from you. It's always great to see our international audience and where people are coming from. So go ahead, pop into that chat there and tell us where you're calling in from today. And we will get started in just one moment here.
All right, Mickey, you're all set.
All right, so folks that are just joining us in there, new attendees coming in, go ahead and drop into the chat feature where you are coming in from today. I'm super excited to see all the variety of folks where everybody's coming in. You should see a chat button down at the bottom there, so go ahead and let us know where you're coming from. Hopefully folks are gaining the capability to do the chat. Let me just make sure everybody has, oh, you know what? I didn't have that permission on. So now please go ahead and hit that chat button. Please share with us where you are tuning in from today so that we can get an idea where our audience is coming from. Sorry about that, folks. Awesome. There we go. There we go. I was like, why is nobody mentioned? Awesome. Thanks, everybody, so much. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So let's go ahead and get started. Thank you, everybody, for joining this event. This is offsitebylernit.com. Super excited to spend some time together with you this morning. And my fantastic teammate, Christian Durso, is going to be talking about strategic planning for 2023, which I think is a perfect event for us to be focused on here in January, a few weeks in, as we're thinking very seriously about how we get strategic about the new year. My name is Mickey Fitch Collins. I'm joined by my teammate, Christian Durso, who's going to be leading us through today's session. To those of you that are new to Learnit and learning about these events and what we're doing, great to meet you. For those of you that are coming back week after week, we're so grateful for your presence to be here. Learnit is a learning and development organization based out of San Francisco, California, but we are located nationwide and in fact across countries. We are committed to helping individuals learn the skills that they need to thrive in the workplace. We also work with organizations to improve things like company culture and build scalable training and learning and development programs. Again, to those of you who have been coming back week after week, year after year, are members of our offsite community. We have over 7,500 people that are part of this community, so welcome back. How this works, we host these events roughly every other Friday at 8:30 Pacific Standard Time. These events are 1-hour events, and these are an event for us to be able to call to our mission, which our mission is to make professional development resources and learning free and accessible to everybody as much as possible. These events are a way for us to connect in community and also a way for you to get a flavor for our full-length content. So the session that Christian's going to be leading us through today is just a little bit of a taster of our larger 2-hour workshop on strategic thinking. These sessions are always led by either one of us as instructors or one of our trusted guest speaker friends. A couple of housekeeping items before I pass that big mic over to Christian. I'd love for you to interact as much as possible through that chat. I'm going to be watching that chat. Christian's going to be watching that chat. With this being a webinar format, the chat interaction or that Q&A button is a really good place for you to enter your questions, your comments, whatever that looks like. At the end of the session too, I'm going to be putting an evaluation into the link into the chat here so that we can get some feedback for you. But without further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce you to my colleague, Christian. Christian, we got to get a new picture of you, man. You got a different hairstyle now than you did in this picture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got one. I'll send it. Yes, but awesome. I do new picture coming.
So Christian has been with our team for several years now. He's a professional development trainer. He's a very accomplished playwright and screenwriter, and he runs a nonprofit organization in his hometown, Los Angeles, California. He brings a lot of creativity into the lives of working professionals and plans, bringing more professionalism into the lives of creatives. He has a background as a crisis counselor and values clear, empathetic communication as the basis for powerful relationships at home and at work. Christian has executive produced and written shows for Netflix, awesome, films for Sony, and plays for theaters across the nation. He has managed teams internationally and remotely. He's created engaging learning environments where students, colleagues, and peers can enjoy and access their potential and discover joy in their work. Today, I'm super excited about this session. I've been looking forward to this one for a couple of weeks now. He's going to share some insights and strategies around strategic planning for 2023. So Christian, go ahead, take it away. The screen is yours, the mic is yours, and I will be sitting in the background here. So go for it, man.
Thank you, Mickey. And thank you everyone for being here. Welcome to day 20 of the new year. So I have a question for you in the chat bar. For those of you who may do resolutions or not, I'm curious to know, how are you doing on those resolutions thus far if you have them? Not everyone does them, I know that. But if you did make one, and if you were committed to, how are you doing? On a scale from like 1 to 5, 1, it's trucking along not so well. 5, I'm actually doing pretty well. Just curious to know, temperature check. Mickey's at a 6 to 7. Let's do a scale from, pick your scale. I was going to say 1 to 5, but if Mickey's at a 6 and 7, that means you're crushing it. So what's your scale? Just drop that in the chat bar. I'd love to see where you are all at with that. So thank you, Sonia at a 4.5, Mickey's at a 4.5, great. Taylor's at a 5, 1 through 5, you're a 1. That's okay, Ellen. There's still more time. We're just starting the year. So what I want to talk about is strategic thinking for 2023. Sometimes when we do set goals, when we do set resolutions, when we do try something new in our businesses, in our personal lives, in our careers, we sometimes set goals without really thinking about what a strategy might be. I just want to introduce a couple of concepts today that might help us along that journey. And Ellen, you said was just stop using vulgar language. That's okay. You can skip out on that one if you want, in the appropriate arenas, of course. So let's talk about how we can introduce some strategy. But there's a lot of talk about this term strategy, what it actually means. I want us to get specific about strategy and how to think about it. Sometimes we interchange it for vaguely thinking about it as a goal or vaguely thinking about it as an objective. Let's talk about what strategy might actually mean. So let's start here. Wait a minute, hang on. What actually is strategy? You may have had this experience at work before. I want to give you this hypothetical experience, which also is very real. Your company might bring in a consultant to help you build we call it strategy for the upcoming year. Or maybe you, at the beginning of the year, as you're setting those resolutions to use less vulgar language as an example, you say, I'm going to have a strategy for this. And this consultant might lead you through some exercises, right? And you set an ambitious target. No, I'm not going to lose 20 pounds this year. I'm going to lose even more and gain more muscle. No, we're going to go not 3%, we're going to raise 6% this year, right? And this consultant might say, you're not thinking big enough, keep thinking bigger and bigger, and you redraw the targets and you make bigger goals. The only problem is this kind of approach, it's not necessarily strategy. Strategy is the thing that is going to get you to that goal. As it were, it's a bus that will get you to the school. So similarly, strategy is different from strategic thinking. Strategic thinking is knowing the 9 different routes you could possibly take to get to the school, given the weather, given the terrain, given traffic, right? So that's strategic thinking. And so what this is about getting our minds a little bit more creative, a little bit more inventive, into a mindset where we can be a little bit more adaptable towards a blueprint for a competitive advantage. That's what we're looking at today. The outline for our time here today, in the next hour or so, a little bit less than an hour at this point, we're just going to go through defining what strategic thinking is. We're going to take a look at the attributes. There's a toolkit, and there's 4 different pieces of that toolkit. We're going to take a look at one of those pieces today. When you join us in the larger course, we're going to dive deeper into the other 3. But the one that we're going to cover today is about finding opportunities in our obstacles. So let's go ahead and just define what strategy is. Let's make sure we're getting these terms straight. Under the umbrella of strategy, there is strategic thinking. And a question that we get a lot is strategic thinking the same thing as strategic planning? Can strategic thinking only be used when we're building a strategy, or might it have other uses? So to answer that, let's first understand what strategy really is, because the term gets overused and misunderstood. So strategy, I want you to think of it as a theory. Strategy is a theory of what your competitive advantage is. Another way to think about it is it's a blueprint. Here is my theory. I'm making a case for what I think is our competitive advantage. And then you set off to go towards strategic planning, strategic thinking. Examples of this: Cirque du Soleil, as an example, they had a vision, a strategy, a blueprint, a theory for a new kind of circus, right? Their idea was, hey, let's keep what's fun about the circus, but combine it with more sophisticated theater, combine it with more higher production values, and let's get rid of some of the sideshows and animals, right? That was their blueprint for their competitive advantage when it comes to commercial productions. Another example of this is Southwest Airlines. Surely many of us have flown that. I'm usually in Group C because I just don't bother to check in sometimes. But what they did was they mashed up airplanes and cars. Essentially, they had this idea that you could make air travel more like traveling by a car with frequent short-haul flights rather than going from major hubs to major hubs. It turns out there was really an appetite for this thing. So in both cases, what we're talking about is a hypothesis. It's not just a plan. It's not just a goal. Plans and goals are good things, and we do need them. And in fact, we probably have them, but they're not strategies in and of themselves. So let's show you what I mean by that. Again, this is a theory of what will give you the advantage. One way to sort this apart is when you have a plan, when you need to make a plan, generally you're working with elements that you can control for the most part, right? As an example, if you were building in addition to a school, typically you have to plan, you can plan for the material, you're controlling, you know, the outlay, you have the plan set up to build the addition to the school. You have the square footage, the design, the people you need to hire. There's a lot of elements that you actually do control. Strategy, however, is a little bit different. It's more variable. So meaning it's more subject to change, requires a little bit more flexibility into the routes and sometimes even the target. So this means that it can kind of go on indefinitely. We often wonder, okay, when do I use a plan? When do I apply a strategy? Here's a bit of a guide here. When to use it: when you have variables such as a competitor, or when you might lose something, when the outcome is a little bit more uncertain. This is where strategy comes into play. So again, plans are very vital tools, but sometimes you just need that strategy first. Something a strategy does not look like, I just want to share this too. Go ahead and read that right there, right? Our company strategy is to boost productivity in order to increase sales by 6%. This is not a strategy. This is a goal. So we want to be able to just separate these two and make sure that that we're clear about these differences. I think strategy is not, right? It's not just a goal. It's not a strategy if it does not define what your challenge actually is. Also, get rid of the fluff. It doesn't have a lot of fluff. It's clear, it's concise. It doesn't try to do too much. It just has the basic blueprint of what we're going to do for our approach. And also, it needs to make a decision. So a strategy will make a decision about something. Back to that Southwest example, right? It's the speed of a plane at the price of a car. And they focused on three main elements here. It's going to be friendly, it's going to be fast, and it's going to be frequent. So this is strategy. I really want us to think about that. And this is strategic thinking. This is an analytic activity that encourages creativity, encourages inventiveness, and solving our problems in order to make strategic decisions on something. So this is our mindset that we want to gather for ourselves. It's going to help us see what other people are now missing. It takes a look at that bigger picture. And so I'm curious to know, as we're going through strategy, strategic thinking, strategic planning, if you have any thoughts or questions or something that's occurring to you, again, feel free to drop this in the chat bar. I'm happy to use that chat bar throughout our time today as a sort of running feed. I will always be looking at it. Any comments are always welcome. Any questions along the way are also welcome. So this is strategic thinking, and this is what we're doing for our time for 2023 and what we're looking at for today. Some ways to separate strategic thinking from planning. There's some debates in academic circles around this, but we don't think that they are actually the same thing. You do need to execute, of course, on your goals. So planning is something that's logical. It's systematic. It is all these things. It's convergent, meaning you're bringing things together. It's also analytical, whereas thinking is a bit more creativity. It has a little bit more creativity to it. Synthetic, meaning you're bringing two things that do not seem like they belong together, and you're bringing them together, like the automobile and the plane, and finding what they have in common, which is short stops. So it's synthetic. It's also divergent, meaning we're really looking outside the box. We're spreading outwards rather than trying to just find the one right answer. A bit more creativity. It follows our intuitions as well. Also, there's innovation. It's something novel that we haven't seen before. And that's why you get the second part, which is that competitive advantage. So this is where we are heading for today. So just as a brief little recap here, because we want to make sure we're getting these terms right and that you have a firm grasp of them. Strategy, it's more than just a plan. It's really more than just a goal. It's a hypothesis for how you're going to achieve those goals. In the planning, these are the actions you're going to take to apply that strategy. So how do we become more strategically thinking? How do we have better thoughts? So how do we develop these skills? Let's take a look at the toolkit, and these are what we're going to spend some time on here today. And as we go through, I'm going to ask you to respond in the chat bar. There's going to be a few times when I'm going to ask for your thoughts on something or how this tool might fit into your personal toolkit. So here are the four that I want to introduce all of them to you. We're going to focus on just one of them. And this is about finding opportunities in obstacles. This is where we have an intent focus on something. And we remember that the map that we have might not be the territory. We'll go into a little bit further about what that actually might mean. We also want to make sure we're seeing what other people are missing. A lot of times people are too busy to think through the consequences of their actions in order to look for alternative solutions to problems. So we're using something called second order thinking to look past binary fallacies, binary consequences, to find alternatives that are down the road. Also, we tend to make a lot of assumptions. We want to re-examine those assumptions. We want to take a bright, hot light and look at what our assumptions are. We don't want to let them go unchecked. We apply something called first principles thinking in order to disassemble what those assumptions are and then reconstruct it. This also means that we are going to be solving for a bigger picture here. So these are the four main areas of our toolkit. The one we're going to focus on for today is how to find opportunities in the obstacles. So let's do that. This comes from Ryan Holiday's book, The Obstacle is the Way. It's worth reading if you haven't taken a look at it. It's a little bit of a cruise through Stoicism, and it has a lot of really great information in there. Essentially, what it boils down to is that every obstacle that we encounter is actually an opportunity to improve our condition, to improve ourselves, to improve what the outcome might be. What you think is holding you back might actually be whispering to you the answer forward. Now, to be clear, sometimes an obstacle really truly is just an obstacle. But let's ask ourselves about that obstacle. Let's learn about the nature of the obstacle that might be telling us something that we need to hear rather than to see it only as something that needs to be crushed, disassembled, moved around, ignored. So strategic thinkers, they are finding small opportunities and advantages, even in difficult situations. They take time to think through what advantages might be able to be found. So I'll take you through a couple steps now that we can use to find what these opportunities are in obstacles, and we'll practice a couple of them together on a brief case study, which we will operate through the chat bar. So the first main area here is to distance yourself from the problem. I want to introduce a story, and this one comes from Pericles. So Pericles was sailing towards battle with all of his army, 100 soldiers. And as they were sailing on a sunny afternoon, an eclipse suddenly came through and blotted out the sun. So it suddenly became dark, And these soldiers became frightened by what had just happened. They became terrified. They weren't able to steer the boat anymore. They thought it was a terrible omen. And the person steering the boat said, we can't go forward. We cannot go forward. And Pericles decided to talk with this person and to get them to see how he might be able to distance himself from the problem. So what Pericles did was he took a cloak and he threw it over the man's head. And Pericles said, "Are you afraid of this dark?" And the man said, "Well, no, it's just a cloak over my head." And Pericles said, "That is the same thing that is happening up there. There's no reason to be afraid. It's just like a cloak going over your head briefly." So this story highlights our need to calm ourselves in the face of an obstacle first, because often when we see an obstacle, we will be encouraged to go toward our fight, flight, freeze mindsets. And so this is something that we want to remind ourselves of. How do we calm ourselves in the face of an obstacle? This is the first step in being able to distance ourselves from our problem. There's a couple ways we can do that. This first one, normalizing the experience. So what this is broadening your perspective to include other people who are experiencing or who have experienced a similar challenge. What this means is reaching out to someone else. Have you ever seen this before? Have you ever done this before? Oh my gosh, this just happened. What do you think? You might find as you encounter these issues that someone else has actually been here before. This happened to me very recently. Got one of those big scary letters from the IRS saying, hey, you this and that, and maybe you're in trouble. And those always feel like a reprimand notice from the principal of your high school, right? All those old fears pop up and you go, oh God, oh no, this huge obstacle. What am I going to do? The minute I began asking other people, have you gotten a letter like this? Have you done? Suddenly it began to get normalized. Oh, I have gotten that. Here are a couple of things you can do. Oh, don't worry about that. These are 3 things. Suddenly the fear drops down, right? Thank you, Ellen. I appreciate that there in the chat bar. You didn't expect to hear about this, about our mindsets and the way our amygdala might work in Stoicism. I'm glad you came for the strategy and you're staying for the Stoicism. So as you ask other people, as you reach out, this is one way to begin normalizing their experience. One way to do this is by actually making a touch point with someone else, saying, hey, have you ever been here before? Another thing to do is to do a little bit of research. Has this ever happened? One of the things that happens when we see that obstacle is we sometimes think I'm the only person to ever be in this situation ever before in my life. Another thing we can think of is turbulence in an airplane. You ever done that where it starts getting a little bumpy and suddenly you're saying, oh, this time, not the thousands of other flights that happened just this week, but this time, the one that I am on, here's where it's going to become a big problem. This is where normalizing your experience can be really helpful. You know what? There are thousands of flights that leave every week. Thousands of them land. All of them at some point experience some degree of turbulence. Guess what? This is a normal experience. And that's the first thing you can do to begin calming yourself down, knowing that it happens quite often. And in fact, there's more reason to perhaps be afraid of driving in your car because that's far more dangerous. But because that's already normalized, you say, I have to drive, so I'm going to take that risk. It's only in the plane because it's a little bit more risky where we say, I'm the only one who's ever experienced this. So normalizing your experience, know that you're not the only person to have felt this, gone through it. Generally, you're not alone. Now, even if you are the only person on the face of the earth to ever have dealt with this particular obstacle, there are still other tools that you can reach for. So the other one, it would be something called temporal distancing. What this is this distances yourself from the problem, not immediately, not through others' experiences, but through time, right? Taking a distant future perspective on the specific stressor. What this does is it's shown as people do this, as they think through time, they think into the future, 5 years, 10 years later. They think, how am I going to feel about this later? Right? It's likely going to be something very minimal. You can think right now, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, think of a problem that you felt was very, very, very big. How much does it have a true impact on your life today? Now, sometimes we might say, well, it still does. Sometimes that's true, but a lot of times the thing that we thought was big actually diminishes over time. As we take that perspective, this allows us to step away And as Ellen said in the chat bar, it allows us to sort of deactivate that amygdala hijack that's happening where it's just beating in emergency mode. What we're doing is we're taking the keys away from the teenager who wants to drive the sports car into a wall, which is sometimes our amygdala saying freak out mode. So these are two ways we can distance ourselves from our problems. I'm curious to know in the chat bar, has anyone here tried to utilize either of these before to any degree of success? Or if not, which of these seem to be something that you could use more often, normalizing your experience or temporal distancing? I'll open up to the chat bar right now, and I'll give you a couple minutes to do so. I'm curious to know what your feedback is on this. Have you utilized normalize your experience or temporal distancing in the past? Which one do you feel like might be most useful for you in your situation? So, chat bar, go ahead. I appreciate you, Mickey. The normalizing thing, knowing you're not the first nor the last person to be experiencing what you're experiencing, saying things like others have survived, and thrived perhaps in this. I really love how you're saying not just survive, but actually they got better from this, right? That helps you in parenting, being a partner, a professional, and more. Great. Chris, thank you so much. Chris Taylor. Definitely have used normalizing experience. It helps definitely to get other perspectives, to see past your own boundaries. Sometimes you might even be able to get a piece of advice from someone else too. Say, oh, you know what, try this. This is what I did. I've been here before. Suddenly when it feels normal, you don't have to feel like you are the only person to ever felt this, and it lowers your stress level. Chelsea Bear, thank you. You say you need to work more on normalizing that experience. So that's an area where you want to do a little more often, but you use temporal distancing to help. So one thing to do there is to maybe come up with a bit of a speed dial. Remember when back in the day when you had like the top 8 on your cell phones, back when we had flip phones? Am I aging myself here? Where you say, okay, I'm just gonna, who can you reach out to? Who are some people you can reach out to more or less on speed dial to say, hey, I need to talk through this. This is the person I can reach out to help normalize the experience. Because it's likely that there is a normal experience out there. This is one of the reasons why Facebook groups can be so helpful. I'm dealing with this very specific problem that no one has felt before. Suddenly you join a Facebook group and you're like, oh my God, there's thousands. I had no idea. So this is the way people can really help each other. Kelly Hundley saying, normalizing your experience. You do not feel alone. Really great. Every time you take a flight, travel, you like to use normalizing. Yes, Taylor, it's same with me. Every time those bumps hit, it feels, because it seems like a significant threat, right? But just remind yourself, this is fairly normal activity. It feels abnormal to you because you only do it once every so often, but it happens all the time. Jeanette, you saying you used temporal distancing. Sonia saying you definitely have used both. You lean heavily on the temporal distancing, thinking in the future, how am I going to feel about this later? You think you can incorporate normalizing experience. Laura, you saying you maybe haven't used either. Normalizing your experience, you'd like to incorporate a little bit of that. Mickey is also saying here, social media in a lot of ways is normalizing experiences, except when things become too encompassing. Social media has a double-edged sword. It can really help, but it can also really take away your time and sometimes your mental energy, right? Ellen is saying temporal distancing can be a useful technique for impromptu problem solving. So great. I like that you're saying as a way to quickly sort of think through something. As you distance yourself from the problem, this is where Stoicism comes in helpful, is now you have a distance out, you can look at it. You are no longer entangled in it. In a way, you're actually able to put the problem up on a whiteboard to be able to move the X's and O's around. When your face is smashed up against that whiteboard, you can't see the X's, you can't see the O's, you just see a big blank of white and a big problem. Moving back allows you to say, okay, I have a bigger picture. I see what's here, I'm breathing, I can see the problem, and now I can take a look at employing some strategy. So really great. This is distancing yourself from the problem. And thank you everyone for your comments here. I want to look at another way we can find opportunities in the obstacles. And what this is reframing what the obstacle is, reframing what it even looks like. So now you have the distance between yourself and the problem. Let's reframe what it is you're facing. And a helpful mental model to do this, where I want to introduce to you, is just something called the map is not the territory. This is a clever way of telling us that the description of the problem might not be the same thing as the actual problem. Just the way, if you take a look at the map of the United States or of the world or of any city in the world, it's not a 100% accurate representation of the territory, right? You can see how big Greenland claims to be and how big Iceland might be. These small little obscurities. The map isn't always an accurate representation. If anyone here ever took art history as an example, you might recall a painting by René Magritte and this was something called The Treachery of Images. And this was a painting of a pipe. It was a painting of a pipe, like a pipe that you smoke, right? And below in French, he wrote, "This is not a pipe." He made this painting in 1929. This is not a pipe, and it was a picture of a pipe. The idea was it was playing with your head. You see, okay, well, that's a pipe. And well, it's not a pipe. It's actually just a painting of a pipe. It's kind of playing with some cleverness there, right? But the idea is that you're not looking at a pipe, but you might be thinking you're a pipe. So the value of this mental model is it encourages you to look outside the narrow frame of your description of the problem. It helps you take a much larger view to look at it from different angles. What else can we see this problem from? Chances are you don't need to accept the problem that immediately presents itself to you as the problem that you need to solve. I'll give you an example of this. There's a truck that is driving along a highway and it comes to a bridge, and the truck driver miscalculates how tall the truck is and how low the bridge is, and the truck goes under the bridge and gets stuck. Now the truck can't go forward, can't go back. It's stuck under the bridge. There's some damage to the roof. It can't go either way. Traffic is backing up for miles. A big problem is happening, and everyone comes down to solve the obstacle. What is the problem? And everyone takes a look at the problem of the truck being stuck underneath the bridge. And so people come up with solutions to solve that obstacle. And they say, well, we can try cutting off the top of the truck so we can get the truck through, or we can dismantle parts of the bridge so we can move the truck through. It takes a little girl riding her bicycle along the sidewalk to be able to see that the map is not the territory and say, why don't you just take the air out of the tires? So the problem that we were trying to solve was, how do we get the wedge of the top of the truck and the bottom of the bridge to some room between them? What we didn't really take a look at was there's another way out. The obstacle was just lowering the truck a little bit. That leads us to air out of the tires. We gain an inch or so, and that's enough to move the truck out of the way. Whereas we could have spent a lot of time trying to cut that truck or dismantle the bridge, there was maybe something simpler there if we allow ourselves to back up and reframe what we think it is we're looking at. Same way with the Pericles example as well, where reframing that bad omen is from the gods is just dark. So I want to ask in the chat bar now here too about this one. The map is not the territory. Reframing, rethinking the obstacle. Comments, thoughts. Has this come up for you? Have you tried utilizing it? Where might this be useful? If you can be specific too, that could also be helpful. When is the map not the territory? Is this something you feel like you could use? Have you used it? How else might you reframe the obstacle? Success with this? Any of those, go ahead and share in the chat bar here on this one. Reframing the obstacle. The map is not the territory. I know everyone's wildly typing away. Thank you, Mickey. I appreciate you. By the way, when you join us in our longer classes, the great value we have is we can actually have a face-to-face conversation and we can work through things in real time, and it's awesome. Thank you, Mickey. You think a lot about this with health and fitness as reframing what the obstacle is, right? It's not an obstacle to, the obstacle is not weight loss or maintaining unhealthy weight, but but more that the reframe is being healthier in your 40s and increasing movement and strength. It's a really great way to think about the value and the why behind why we want to do things, right? I want to be able to enjoy my life a little bit more. It's going to help me go back to the gym more often, and because my strategy is really more focused on how do I become more healthy, right? Great. Ellen, you're saying that you keep thinking of scenes from movies where this is illustrated, where the map might not be the territory. Where is this, Ellen? This might be something where they think the problem is one thing, and they actually, by Act 3, they're actually solving an entirely different problem, but it's the problem they needed to solve all along. Is that kind of thing, maybe, perhaps, Ellen? Yeah, absolutely. Great. Taylor, you're saying that Taylor Elliott is saying this is a great example. Trying to look at things differently is so difficult. It really is, right? We see that truck crash under the bridge, and we're like, this is the problem up here. We're drawn to the site of the damage, the site of of where it seems to be the highest pressure problem, but it's really sometimes below. So how do we find the air in the tires of our obstacle? Great. And you can encounter this in many life experiences as well as work. Sonia, you're saying this makes you think of times when you've done an analysis and you're having a hard time getting the storytelling to make sense. I love that you're a storyteller. It really helps to step back and remember what you're trying to convey. Really good, going back to this, what does the audience need to hear? What do I need to say? Do I have that? Is my beginning and my end, are they different enough? Is my middle, does it work? Really great, Sonia. I love that. Taylor Elliott saying it's a frame of mind. This can be hard to do sometimes, which is why sometimes we get to reframe the obstacle. We get caught back up in it. We can go back to that, normalize the experience. Temporal distancing backs us off a little bit. We need to get far enough away back so we can get that same perspective of the little girl on the bike. Say, I want to look at this with fresh eyes, and I want to see something that maybe no one else is seeing right now. Chelsea, Barry, you're saying helps to think about obstacles like when there's an obstacle that can also be an opportunity for a new idea or reworking a process. That can be a positive thing. Really great, Chelsea. And this is that you actually could not have probably written a better segue for me to go into the next area, which is how we might look for other forms of value. When we're facing an obstacle, we've likely lost a form of value. So to find opportunity in that obstacle, we want to think about other forms of value that you can get from that situation. So sometimes we can remind ourselves that necessity actually is the mother of invention. So we'll look at a couple of models of what this is. The one I want to focus on right now is called inversion. This is where you actually take the problem and turn it on its head. One useful phrase that you can put in your back pocket on a Post-it note is, how can this worst thing be the best thing? And again, if we have not normalized our experience, we haven't distanced ourselves from the problem, this can become a very difficult question to ask ourselves, because we're entangled in the problem, fight and flight and freeze mode. How can we possibly even entertain this being the best thing? Because it's clearly the worst thing. But once we've had a little bit of distance, we've looked at other ways around looking at this, we might be able to ask ourselves this question: how can this potentially be the best thing for me? Is there, in fact, a great lesson to be learned here? Here's where we're trying to tune in to the frequency of the whispering of that obstacle. What is it saying to me? I want to tune in. What is it trying to tell me? How could this actually be the best thing? There's two ways to ask yourself a question. Why is this happening to me? Or why is this happening to me? Right? Emphasize the why, emphasize the is, and this gives you a different perspective. Well, why is it happening to me? There might be a good reason. Why is this happening in our company? Why is this happening in our department? What do we need to go for? What do we need to grow from here? What do we need to go? Right? We too often stop at the first one, which is, why is this happening to me? Right? Why is this happening to me? Mickey, you're saying you think about this sometimes with flight delays. So many people get bent out of shape about it. Take an opportunity to be alone time, reading time, walking time, right? So invert that problem. This is a great opportunity to do that sometimes. Say, okay, how often do I have time to myself where I can maybe read a book, where I can learn something? When was the last time I had a nice meal to myself? Sometimes you can take a flight delay and say, this might actually be a good thing. And then what's great is your mood changes. You're now looking for other good things. When you're in that negative, this is the worst thing, you're actually priming yourself to look for things that might not be so good. Ellen loves what you said there, Mickey. So I thank you, Ellen. I appreciate you shouting Mickey out there. This has happened in business. There was a young executive at Microsoft who was responsible for a massive flame out. It was a massive failure, as it were. And it was a project that he was leading. It lost about $1 million unsuspectedly. It was something that just was supposed to work. The young exec thought it would work, and it could not have gone any worse. His boss calls him into his office, and the young executive says, "So I guess you're going to want my resignation." And the boss said, "No, actually, I want to know what you learned. I just spent $1 million. I want to know, what knowledge did we get from it?" Now, wouldn't it be so cool to have $1 million to buy a lesson, right? But wouldn't it be so nice? But I think there's something to be learned from this story. That, okay, something really bad happened. What did I gain from it? Because even if there's a lesson to be gained here, then you maybe have actually learned something. And this is how we say, okay, what is the best thing here? That was a very expensive lesson, perhaps, but maybe that value that we're getting from that lesson is something that can help me, help us, help our team. So inversion, just thoughts on, have you ever tried this? Looking for other forms of value, finding, this is the silver lining approach. In the chat bar, thoughts on inversion. Have you done this before? Have you tried this before? And then after this, we're going to take a look at a brief case study, and I want to hear your thoughts on how you might apply this in a certain situation. So inversion, how have you tried this in the past? Or has it worked? Is this something you feel like you want to try? Any comments at all on this one? Inversion, taking something, turning it on its head to see if there's something on the underbelly that's really, really useful. Have you ever used this with your obstacles? Again, what we're doing is we're taking that obstacle and we're looking at it this way. We've distanced ourselves from it. What is it this way? What happens if this way? How is it if it catches the light here or there? Thank you, Taylor. Thank you, Ellen. I appreciate you. Taylor's saying, yeah, you've tried to look at things differently as long as you can get your own stubbornness out of the way. Isn't that interesting that sometimes we can be the obstacle toward reframing the obstacle? Really, really great. Sometimes we have a stubborn way. I want to see things a certain way, or I'm convinced it's only ever going to be this way. Getting that out of the way can sometimes help us move toward looking at something totally differently. Ellen, you say inversion is something that helps you uncover the miracles in mundane things. I love that the terminology you're using here, that sometimes the most important thing actually is the thing in front of you. If you can practice that, boy, your life can really change. It become interested in what is actually in front of you. So an inconvenient delay might mean a crisis is avoided. Another really great thing happened to me just last week. I was on my way to take a yoga class before I had to teach a class, and I thought I'd be clever, and I thought I would cut through a gas station because I was trying to make a right, and the person in front of me was stopped at the red light. You know that clever thing you do? Have you ever tried to do that? You're like, I'm just going to cut through this gas station. I'm going to make a right, and I'm going to save myself 5 seconds. Oh boy, did I misjudge the curb, and I popped my tire. And I must have done something really great because these are not old tires. These are fairly new tires. I completely blew flat. Guess what? Didn't get to go to yoga. But I thought to myself, okay, how can I invert this? Okay, what is the lesson I can learn here? Okay, I didn't get to go to yoga. Sure, I'm going to show up to my teaching a little bit more frazzled than I would, because now I got to figure out how to get a spare on here and all that. But I think maybe there was something that was avoided down the road. Maybe I just didn't need to get to that yoga class. Maybe I needed to learn the lesson of, okay, let's be more patient. Let's not try to save myself 7 seconds on the road. Maybe I just saved myself some larger collision that would have happened this week, perhaps, right? There's no way of thinking about it as, okay, that was maybe an expensive lesson, and it certainly was a time-consuming lesson, and it was a tedious lesson, but maybe there was something there that could be really useful. So really great, Ellen. Chelsea, you're saying you've applied this, but usually it's after you've gone through several days of being upset or frustrated. Great. Sometimes we need to take that time to shake that, to really shake that dust out of there, deal with an emotion, let it live in its place. It's really great when we can say, you know what, now is not the time for decisions. Now is the time for the emotion, and let's deal with that emotion. Let's have it. It's sometimes when we make decisions on top of that emotions that we can make decisions that we don't necessarily want to align ourselves with. Now, sometimes we'll still make that decision anyway, but it's really better have that emotion and then find ourselves at a more reasonable time when we can really think things through. Maybe that emotion taught you something. Now I know what I need to do, but let me see if I can make this decision at a different time. So really great. You know the value of inversion, so hoping to apply this earlier on when met with obstacles. Megan saying, similar to what Mickey said, you had a really long commute, but you were on the train. You looked at, this is me time. Okay, it's a long commute, but how can I do this as me time? To read a book, listen to music, or zone out instead of being frustrated? Sure, I live in Los Angeles. It's all kinds of commuting. Audiobooks can be really great. You know what? I have an hour to get to Santa Monica. Oh boy, this could be awful. Hey, what if I just take a look at this audiobook? So how do I do that and learn something here? Great. And Chelsea saying it's important to process through the emotions. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you, Ellen, for calling out Chelsea there. Great. Reviewing obstacles and viewing different mindsets that think outside the box. Sonia, you're saying you love this example. If you miss an exit on a freeway, you might have avoided an accident. Just so it's if you're going to tell yourself a story, tell yourself a good one. Why bother telling yourself the one that's going to make you more frustrated? It's still a story. You have no evidence that your day is absolutely ruined now because you missed the freeway exit. Tell yourself a good one. If you're gonna make up a story, may as well make up a good one. This helps you keep you in a mindset that can actually help you look for strategy. And it's a little bit easier to live that way sometimes too. Brief case study here. I want to we have about a little bit less than 10 minutes here. And I want to have you apply this. And I want you to apply it in the chat bar. I want you to put yourself in the shoes of someone who's in sales, and your budget has just been cut for face-to-face meetings. And that has been historically how you have made business. By meeting face-to-face, you're really good in person, you build rapport, and that has been the way you've gotten your paychecks. That's the way you've created value for your company and for yourself, and created a reputation. And now there's no budget to go face-to-face anymore. So this is the obstacle. This is the problem you're facing. And I want us to go, I kind of want you to chime in on the chat bar here, right? How might you, just give you a minute or two here, how might you distance yourself from the problem? Take one or either one, normalizing the experience or temporal distancing. How might you do that here? Right? You feel worried. You're convinced the new restrictions are going to damage your relationships, right? So you're going through that emotional spin that was just being mentioned earlier. Like, oh, okay, I'm so worried about this. So let's take a step. How might we normalize or temporal distance in this situation? Your budget has been cut. You can't meet face-to-face anymore. What are things you might do in the chat bar? So Jane said, you think your bias after COVID is a real life situation. So you're right. It's a case study, but it's not hypothetical anymore, right? Really, it's true, Jane. So what did we do in March of 2020? We said, okay, I'm not alone at the very least, right? And probably in March of 2020, we said, well, it'll be over by April 30th. It'll be done. Oh boy. So Chris, you saying I might connect with other peers, what they're thinking about that issue. Perhaps other peers that you work with say, what do you think you're going to do, right? And really say, okay, but I'm not alone here. Perhaps to other companies too. Has anyone else ever dealt with this before? A budget cut where suddenly they can't do face-to-face meetings anymore. Normalize, Nikki says, most people have done this with COVID. Yes, everyone has already faced this. So I've been here before. Cuts are happening everywhere is what Molly's saying. Normalize, it's not unusual. So it makes it feel less like you have been wronged by you're the only person who've been wronged by this. Seeing how remote companies have executed in the past. Look at that. There's probably some journal articles here, how people have done it before. I might need to educate myself. Sonia's saying, think about the fact that relationships are built over time and that this might be an opportunity to be more efficient in the face-to-face meetings. Look at that. You're already moving on to finding value, which is the next one, which I'll ask you to take a look at because Sonia's already in there. So let's move on to it. How is the map not the territory? How might we reframe this obstacle? So, and Sonia brings up this great option here of the face-to-face meetings. I might be more efficient. I might be able to have more of them, perhaps, right? And Molly's saying we might try to set up virtual meetings with these people. Does it have to be an or, is what Starlin is asking, because the temporal distance may grant space for processing? Yes, it's a good question. Does it have to be an or? The answer is no, it does not have to be an or. It could be both. They could go both together. And in fact, sometimes they do. One might feed into the other. And as you're going through these, you might find that map is not the territory might come into thinking about temporal distancing. I'm thinking about the problem being right now, but 5 years from now, I think I can rely on my ways of still building relationships in other ways. Mickey's saying, hey, what if I have fun with Zoom backgrounds? There might be a way to have more engagement, perhaps, and more opportunities for touch points rather than just the face-to-face meetings when I'm traveling. Ellen is saying temporal distancing. How does the client feel about this? Does this give the client an advantage? This might actually, I might be able to convince the client that there's greater value without the face-to-face, perhaps. Really great. So let's move to the last one here. How might you look for other forms of value? And we're already doing it. How do we make this the best thing? Right. How do we make this obstacle perhaps the best thing? And we're already kind of saying it here. Maybe I'll have more meetings. Perhaps I can bring greater value. How can this be the best thing that's ever happened to us? And in some ways, right, all the difficulties that the COVID challenges to do, it has opened up some things that have truly improved. In terms of communication, I mean, I'm not talking about the disease itself or the pandemic. I'm talking about the way we communicate. There's been some improvements perhaps here. Meetings help normalize, Lori's saying. Jane is saying we have more time to connect with people because the drive time is removed. Great, I'm commuting perhaps less. This is actually could be a net positive for myself. And Chris is saying here that I'm always looking for an opportunity in what might be an unfortunate, difficult situation. So that's a really good thing that you're always keeping yourself in that mindset to be able to do. Ellen's saying, hey, maybe no more jet lag in travel meals. This might mean I'm healthier, right? You ever have that fried whatever it is at the airport while you're waiting for the plane? It's tasty, but then you're like, I can't do this all the time. So maybe I can actually make my own meals. So we're just looking for ways of seeing the opportunity here. And Mickey's saying, circle in on convenience. Okay, there might be a greater convenience here. There's no long waits to meet with the client because we can set up meetings likely sooner. We have access to our calendars a little bit more, and we're not dealing with travel days, perhaps, or our commute times. This is a really great way to perhaps utilize our time for more greater value. So really, really great. So we're looking for the opportunities that we have not seen. This is about finding opportunities within the obstacle, listening to that obstacle, letting it talk to us, reframing what it is. The map is not the territory. Are there other ways to look at this? If we only focus on, I'm no longer going to be meeting face to face, our focus stays there. We're trying to cut the top of the truck or break apart a bridge. There's other ways to maybe get that truck out. The obstacle might just be an inch of air to let out of the tires. So really good. We just kind of went through that as a case study. Here is my issue to you, and we're going to end here in the next minute or so. But I want you to, as you leave today, I want you to think about obstacles that you're currently facing in your professional life. And I want you to identify one of the underlying obstacles. What else is there? How can you look at it differently? And name a couple of actions that you can take to seize on a new opportunity. So as you leave today, that is your homework for having shown up here today. But hopefully it's fun homework where you can say, here's something I'm dealing with. Here are a couple of things I'm going to do. I'm going to invert it. I'm going to look at the map, not the territory. How can I reach out to 3 or 4 people to normalize my experience? So that's what we're looking at today. I want you to make sure you're doing this homework as you leave. Ellen has said here also in the chat bar, you feel like when you give the obstacle a center stage, it's like thinking a stop sign is a permanent state. I really like your image there, Ellen, to think that we actually will, when we focus on it, it becomes the only thing. Look elsewhere. What else might be around this obstacle? Let's get a more of a distance. Let's find that inch of air that we can take out. So this is bringing us to the end of our time. I want to pass it back to Mickey. First of all, I just want to thank you all for being here. You were all great. Thank you for loading that chat bar up. I'm hoping that this was a really good sample for you. if you join us in the larger ones, we get a chance to actually talk face to face. We work through them. There's 3 other great tools that we can study for this strategic thinking. But I'm hoping that your resolutions keep going forward, whether you set them for yourself or whether you just have goals in your personal and professional life. But thank you for being here. I love working with you all, and you've been great. Mickey, go ahead, take it back. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you everybody for being here. Thank you, Christian, for giving this session. Please, let's give Christian a little bit of love in the chat here. Give him some nice comments. If you are interested in taking that full class, I just put the link to that class in the chat here. There's a couple of upcoming sessions, not until April and May, but they are coming up for us a little bit there. I want to give you a little bit more information too. We have one more community event coming up yet here in January. Coming up on the 25th, we have a Ask the Expert on running great meetings in teams. Please stay focused and stay tuned to Offsite, where you can see what our community events are going to look like into February there. I am going to go ahead in the chat also put the link to Offsite. I know we have lots of guests coming from our YouTube community here too. So if you aren't already an Offsite member, you can go ahead and click on that link there. You can share that link out to your teammates, your friends, your family, whatever you want to do. Go ahead and share that out to people so that they too can be part of these wonderful events. The last thing I want to do too is to go ahead and put into that chat the evaluation for this session. It's a big long link, but if you could go ahead and click onto that link, you can pull that out to your browser here. So even after we end the session today, you have that in your browser. We want to get some feedback back to Christian, not only on the content of this session, but also tell him how wonderful of a facilitator he is and how much you learned. You can share that back with him too. And again, I just want to say thank you to everybody who has been here today. It's a wonderful session. I know I took a ton of notes down of some different things for me to think about. I love the book Ryan Holiday wrote, The Obstacle is the Way. In fact, here at Learn It, we actually featured that as a little bit of a book club that a number of us were a part of. So wonderful, wonderful session. I'm seeing lots of love coming to you, Christian, in the chat there. So again, thank you everybody so much for being here. Thank you for being part of our Offsite community. We hope to see you at some events into the future. We hope to see you too at some of our public and private classes that we host as well. As Christian mentioned, we get to have a lot more discussion face-to-face, videos on, cameras on, chats, interactions, breakout rooms, all sorts of great stuff that we do in those larger form classes. So again, thank you everybody so much, and we hope that you have a wonderful weekend. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, we'll go ahead and end the session now. Thanks, everyone.
Beautiful.
Thanks, Christian.
Thank you, Mickey. Have a good one.